Talia Nolan was 2 seconds from being fired when a man in a tailored navy suit walked straight into the flower shop and changed her life. He didn't belong there, not with his sharp jaw, Rolex watch, and the kind of presence that made the air shift. The shop smelled like lilies and eucalyptus, but he smelled like money and something darker, something magnetic. "You're the one who arranged the centerpiece for the Langford fundraiser last week?" he asked, voice deep, confident. Talia blinked. "Yeah, that was me." He didn't smile. He studied her like he was making a deal. "I need a date for a gala this Friday. You'll be compensated. You'll wear what I provide, show up on my arm, and smile. That's it." She stared, unsure if he was joking or insane. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm not joking," he said. "You're beautiful. You clean up well, and I need someone who won't try to make it anything more than what it is." She crossed her arms. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "No, just my date, for one night." "That's weird," he shrugged. "It's strategic. People expect me to show up with someone. I'm in mergers. The social side of my business matters. And you just pick someone from a flower shop." "I pick someone who clearly has taste, keeps things simple, and won't make a scene." He glanced at his watch. "Is that a yes?" She should have said no. She had rent due, a fridge that only hummed when she kicked it, and a boss who was one tantrum away from firing her. But this man looked like he could buy the entire block. "What's your name?" she asked. He extended his hand. "Prescott Sloan." Of course his name was Prescott. "Talia Nolan," she said, shaking his hand. "Great. My assistant will send a driver for you Friday at 6. I'll text you the address." "No texting," she said quickly. "Call me if this is real." He nodded once. "Done." And just like that, he turned and walked out, no further explanation. No flirtation. Like he just ordered a coffee, her boss stormed out seconds later. "Who was that? And why weren't you arranging the bridal bouquet?" Talia didn't answer. She just stared at the door, heart racing. She was going to a gala with a stranger named Prescott Sloan. Friday came faster than she expected. A black car pulled up at exactly 6. The driver handed her a garment bag and said, "From Mr. Sloan." Inside was a floor-length champagne-colored gown that fit her perfectly. She didn't ask how he knew her size. The gala was at the Belmore Grand Hotel. She'd seen it in magazines, crystal chandeliers, valet only, the kind of place where cocktails cost more than her electric bill. When she stepped out of the car, Prescott was waiting. He looked like a billionaire version of James Bond, black tux, black tie, and a gaze that locked onto her like she was the only person on the street. "You clean up well," he said, her breath caught. "You don't look terrible either." He gave a soft laugh, and for the first time she saw something real in his eyes. A flicker of warmth beneath the perfect suit. He offered his arm. She took it. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold and crystal. Waiters carried trays of champagne. A string quartet played in the corner. Prescott moved through the crowd like he owned it, which, knowing him, he probably did, people whispered. Watched. Talia stayed close, smiled when he did, nodded when he introduced her as a friend. But then came the moment. A woman in a red velvet dress approached, all sharp cheekbones and calculated charm. "Prescott, imagine seeing you with someone new so soon." Prescott barely flinched. "Talia, this is Victoria, my ex-fiancée." Talia raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Nice to meet you." Victoria gave a tight smile. "And you are?" "She's with me," Prescott said firmly. Victoria looked Talia up and down like she was gum stuck under her Laubautin. "Of course she is." She walked away. Talia leaned close. "I thought this was just about business." "It is." "Then why did you look like you wanted to throw her out a window?" Prescott didn't answer. Later, after the speeches and networking, he led her to the balcony. The city glittered below them. "You didn't have to defend me," she said. "I'm just the girl from the flower shop, remember?" He looked at her then, really looked. "You're not just anything." She held his gaze. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Some cold, arrogant CEO who thought he could buy a date with a dress and a car. He stepped closer. "And what do you think now?" "I think maybe you're just hiding behind all that money and power." His jaw tightened, but he didn't step back. "I wasn't supposed to like this," Talia whispered, "but I did." "I wasn't supposed to notice you," he said. "But I did." She didn't know who moved first, but suddenly his hand was at her waist, and his lips brushed hers like he wasn't sure he was allowed. She kissed him back, and it wasn't pretend, it wasn't business. It was something wild and real and terrifying. When they pulled away, he whispered, "Come back to the penthouse, just to talk." Talia hesitated. Her heart pounded. She didn't do this, she didn't fall for men like him, but something about the way he looked at her felt different. Like he didn't want to own her, he wanted to know her. "Okay," she said softly. And just like that, she followed him into the night, not knowing she was about to fall for him hard. The elevator to Prescott's penthouse moved in silence, the kind that pressed against Talia's chest like an invisible weight. She didn't fidget, but her fingers itched too. The walls were a sleek, reflective black, catching glimpses of her in the gown she hadn't chosen, next to a man who unsettled her in ways she didn't have names for yet. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that didn't feel like a home so much as a showroom. Glass walls revealed a skyline that seemed too close, as if they were floating between buildings. The floors were polished obsidian, the furniture sharp-lined and monochrome, but nothing about it felt cold. The air carried the faintest trace of sandalwood. Prescott loosened his tie with a slow drag of his fingers. "Do you want something to drink?" "I don't usually end the night in penthouses," she said, stepping toward the window, "so I have no idea what the protocol is." He tilted his head. "You don't seem uncomfortable." "I'm not sure I am." He walked to a low cabinet and pulled out a bottle of something amber. "Water, wine, or something that costs more than my first car," she raised an eyebrow. "You had a first car," he poured 2 glasses. "I did. It barely turned left. I was 17, paid for it with a summer job gutting fish on a dock in Maine." "I don't believe that." "I wouldn't either if I were you." He handed her the glass. Their fingers didn't touch, but she could feel the heat of him anyway. "You're not what I thought you'd be," she said. He leaned back against the marble kitchen island. "You thought I'd be colder." "I thought you'd be impossible to talk to." "I am," he said, "but you keep doing it anyway." She sipped. The liquor lit a trail down her throat. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. The question hung in the space between them, heavier than it should have been. "I saw you arranging white orchids the day after the fundraiser," he said finally. "Your apron was stained, your hair was falling out of that knot, but your eyes were, still careful. Like you were trying to make something broken look whole." Her fingers tightened around the glass. "You were watching me." "I was trying not to." They stood in silence for a long moment, then she turned toward the window again. "I don't belong here." "Neither do I," he said quietly. She turned. "You own this place?" "I built it," he corrected. "That's not the same thing." She stepped closer. "Then what do you want?" He looked at her and something in him shifted. "I want one night where nothing is strategic." She should have stepped back. She didn't. His hand reached up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were warm and the touch was gentle, unexpected. He didn't lean in this time, he waited, so she kissed him. It wasn't careful, it wasn't neat. It was messy in a way that made her heart stutter and her skin light up. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer with a need that stripped away the polished exterior he wore like armor. She held onto his collar, anchoring herself in the middle of something that was unfolding too fast, too deep. When they pulled apart, both of them breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should take you home," he said. "You don't want to?" "No," he murmured. "I don't," but he did. He called for the car, walked her to it himself. She slid into the back seat, dazed, unsure what had just happened but too shaken to question it. As the door closed, he leaned in. "I'll see you again, Talia." Her pulse jumped. "You didn't even ask if I wanted to." "I already know." The door shut, the car pulled away, and she didn't look back. Not until the next morning when a knock came at the flower shop's back entrance. She opened it with a frown. A sharply dressed woman stood there, holding a leather-bound folder and a white envelope. "Talia Nolan?" "Yes, I'm from Sloan Holdings. Mr. Sloan asked me to deliver this personally." The woman handed her the folder and envelope, then turned and left without another word. Talia opened the envelope first. Inside was a note in neat, slanted handwriting. "You said you didn't belong. I disagree. If you're willing to see what it looks like when you do, open the folder." She unfolded the leather binder and saw a contract, temporary personal consultant creative partnerships division, a 3-month role, generous salary, Flexible hours, her name already typed in. She stared at it, stunned. He wasn't asking for another date, he was offering her a chance. She didn't know whether to be furious, flattered, or terrified, but she did know one thing: Prescott Sloan had just changed the rules. Again. Talia sat across from Prescott in the conference room that overlooked the East River, her pen tapping once against the edge of the contract, still unsigned. "This isn't a date invitation," she said, watching him closely. "No," he replied, folding his hands on the glass table. "It's a professional offer. You don't think it'll complicate things?" "I think it already has," he said. "But I also think you have a mind for aesthetics and rhythm. I've seen your work." The centerpiece at Langford wasn't just flowers, it told a story. "I didn't know you studied floral arrangements," she said dryly. "I don't, but I know when something makes people stop talking." She stared at the contract again. "You want me to come into your world. But I'm not from it. I'm not asking you to pretend you are." She pushed the folder toward him. "Then tell me why you really want me in your office." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because I'm not used to wanting people around for reasons that don't benefit my bottom line. And I don't know where this leads, but I know I don't want it to end with one kiss and a goodbye." Talia's breath caught, and she hated how much that admission settled into her chest like it belonged there. She took the folder back and signed it. The next morning, she stepped into Sloan Holdings not as a florist, but as part of the Creative Partnerships division, whatever that meant. She'd expected some kind of team, or at least a desk. What she got was an entire office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a customized laptop already set up, and a schedule with her name printed on it. Prescott wasn't in sight. Instead, an older man with salt and pepper hair entered just as she was settling in. "You're the new consultant?" "Yes," she said cautiously. "I'm Henry, Prescott's chief of staff. If you need anything, I'll make sure it happens. And don't worry, you're not here to fetch coffee or fill a quota. He actually wants your input." "On what?" "He'll explain it himself," Henry said. "He doesn't delegate when it matters." Prescott finally appeared just after noon, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows and a folder under his arm. "Walk with me," he said. She followed him down a quiet hallway toward a wing she hadn't seen before. They entered a smaller, more intimate space, no glass, no steel, just wood paneling, framed sketches, and a large drafting table. "This is where we build out partnerships," Prescott said. "Nonprofits, foundations, education sectors. It's the only part of the company that doesn't generate revenue but still answers to me." She glanced at the sketches. "You do these?" He nodded. "My father wanted me to be an attorney. I started sketching buildings in the margins of my textbooks. I still do it. Keeps me grounded." "Why show me this?" "Because the gala wasn't a one-night thing for me, Talia, and I don't want this job to be a stunt. I want you to see who I am outside of suits and strategy meetings." She walked over to the drafting table and touched the edge of a charcoal rendering of a community center. "You're helping build this. We're funding 3 of them, 1 in the Bronx, 2 in Baltimore." She turned to face him. "And you want me to do what exactly?" "Design the visual campaigns, the public-facing identity. You understand how to create beauty that means something." She studied him, unsure if it was a compliment or a challenge. "You're giving me a lot of trust." "No," he said. "I'm giving you control." "I've never done that before." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. Instead, she spent the next 4 hours immersed in sketchboards, mood palettes, and idea walls that hadn't been touched in weeks. By the time she left, the sun was low and the building had emptied out. Prescott was still at his desk, the light from his screen casting shadows across his face. She hesitated in the doorway. "I'm heading out," she said. He looked up. "Do you want a car?" "I have a Metro card." He stood slowly. "Let me walk you down then." They rode the elevator together in silence. She didn't ask why he insisted on escorting her, and he didn't explain. When they reached the lobby, he paused before the revolving doors. "I know I pushed you into this," he said quietly. "But every decision after tonight is yours." "I know," she said. "That's the only reason I'm still here." He nodded, and she walked out into the city. By the following week, word had spread inside the office. No one said anything outright, but she felt the stares. She heard the whispers in the break room about the woman who appeared out of nowhere and went straight to the executive wing. She ignored it. She focused on the project, on the way the layouts came alive under her hands, on the subtle satisfaction of creating something that would outlast press releases and gala speeches. But Prescott didn't stay distant. He showed up at her office with espresso when meetings ran late. He asked for her opinion on campaign fonts, not because he didn't have a preference, but because he wanted to hear her say no. He never hovered, never demanded, but he noticed everything. By the end of the second week, she knew the names of his board members, the pattern of his late-night work habits, and the fact that a single offhand compliment from her could make his eyes soften in a way she suspected no one else had ever seen. Still, they didn't talk about the kiss. Or the night at the penthouse until Friday. She was reviewing print mock-ups when he appeared in her doorway, jacket off, cuffs undone. "There's a benefit tomorrow night," he said. "Black tie, art museum, I need a date." She set down the proof. "You want to go back to that arrangement?" "No," he said. "I want you there, but I want you to choose. And if I say no, I'll go alone." She studied him. "You're not used to people saying no to you." "I'm not used to wanting them to say yes for the right reasons." She stood slowly. "I'll go." He exhaled, not relief, not victory, something quieter. "Then I'll send a car at 7. This time she didn't ask what she'd be wearing. She wanted to choose that herself. The car arrived just before 7, its sleek frame gleaming beneath the soft glow of the streetlights outside Talia's apartment. She stepped out in a midnight blue gown. She'd chosen herself clean lines, minimal embellishments, and an open back that left her feeling powerful instead of exposed. No one had sent it. No one had paid for it. She'd walked into a boutique that morning, asked to see the sale rack, and found it tucked in the back between a cocktail dress and a forgotten bridesmaid gown. It fit like it had waited for her. Prescott was waiting on the museum steps, surrounded by flashes from photographers and murmured greetings from the city's elite. He looked up the moment the driver opened her door. "You're late," he said, offering his hand. "You're early," she countered, taking it. His gaze traveled over her, lingering but not in a way that felt like possession. It was reverence, and it stole her breath. Inside, the museum had been transformed. Deep violet lighting played across marble statues. Waiters wove between guests with trays of champagne and crystal tumblers of aged scotch. A string quartet played in the east wing, and in the center atrium, a silent auction displayed abstract canvases and sculptures encased in plexiglass. Prescott didn't guide her like he had at the last event. He walked beside her, equal pace, equal presence. "You didn't tell me this event was sponsored by Sloan Holdings," she said quietly as they passed a plaque near the entrance. "I didn't want that to be why you came." "I didn't come to impress anyone," she said. "I know." "That's exactly why everyone's staring." She turned her head slightly. "They're not staring at me. They are. You just don't see it yet." They fell into easy conversation with two museum board members, both of whom asked about Talia's work on the community initiative. She answered without hesitation, even as her pulse raced. She knew the project backwards now. She'd spent hours refining the tone of the campaign, selecting color palettes that felt hopeful without being saccharine, and developing a visual language that spoke to dignity and restoration. Prescott didn't interrupt once. He let her speak. More than that, he listened. After the mingling began to thin and the music shifted to something softer, he led her to the second floor, where a mezzanine overlooked the atrium. It was quieter up there, the echo of the crowd below muffled by distance. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low. She turned to him, her hands resting on the balcony's carved stone railing. "If it's about another gala, I have a busy schedule of not owning more than 2 evening dresses." "I'm not asking you to another gala." She waited. "I want to take you off the project." Her brows pulled together. "What? I want you to keep working for the company but not on the community campaign." "Why?" "Because I want to be with you, Talia, and I can't do that while you're under me professionally." She searched his face. "You think I can't separate the two?" "I know I can't," he said. "I want you too much." The breath left her chest. She stepped back. "You could have just said you wanted to date me." No, he said, his voice rougher now. I've dated. This isn't that. You've changed everything. I wake up thinking about whether you've eaten. I cancel meetings just to walk past your office. I've made a career out of being strategic, Talia, but nothing about you is a strategy. You're the only thing I've ever wanted that doesn't make sense on paper. Tears threatened behind her eyes, but she held them back. You're not making this easy. I'm not trying to, he said. You don't belong in a corner office under someone else's vision. You belong where things are built from nothing, and I want to build something with you. She looked at him, and in that moment, she saw everything he'd never said before. The weight behind the way he watched her, the restraint in every touch, the quiet respect he'd shown her day after day without needing recognition. I don't want to leave the project, she said softly. He nodded once, as if bracing himself. But I will, she added. Because I want to find out what this could be without conditions. His relief was so palpable it nearly broke her. Then come with me tomorrow, not to a dinner, not to a flight, just to my house, no suits, no titles. She reached for his hand. Only if you make breakfast. They left the museum together before the final toast. No cameras followed. No one noticed them slip down the side steps and into the waiting car. The next morning, she found herself in a kitchen filled with sunlight and the smell of burnt toast. Prescott stood barefoot, his sleeves pushed up, and a confused expression on his face as he examined a carton of eggs. You know, most people crack them before they try to fry them, she said, stepping in. I was trying to impress you. You already did. They ate at the kitchen island, and for the first time she saw what he was like without the weight of the world on his shoulders. He laughed more easily. He told her about the time he'd gotten food poisoning in Tokyo because he'd tried to impress a client by eating sea urchin off a rooftop. She told him about the time she'd accidentally glued her hair to a plastic wreath trying to make a Christmas display for the shop. By the time the plates were empty, she felt less like a woman who'd been invited into his world and more like someone who belonged there. Weeks passed. She stepped into a new role one built for her, not around her. She designed, she led, she shaped the creative direction of campaigns that mattered. Prescott made good on his promise. He never interfered, never hovered, but at night he was hers. They argued, they collided, they learned. She met his mother, a retired judge with a spine of steel and a heart that melted the moment. Talia brought her a bouquet of hyacinths from the farmer's market. He met her sister, who grilled him over takeout and made him swear he wasn't going to break Talia's heart. And then came the night. She walked into their apartment, no longer just his penthouse, but now a shared space filled with books and artwork and half-finished sketches on the kitchen counter, to find a trail of white petals leading to the rooftop. He stood there in a charcoal suit, the city behind him, a ring in his hand. I asked you once to pretend, he said. Now I'm asking you to make it real. Marry me, Talia. Let me love you without condition, without timeline, for the rest of my life. She didn't hesitate, not for a second. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. He pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her, it wasn't a promise or a question, it was home. Forever, 3 months later, Talia stood barefoot in the garden of the restored brownstone in Brooklyn they'd purchased together. Her fingers were dusted with soil, a row of lavender seedlings waiting in ceramic pots beside her. The late spring air was warm, humming with the sound of bees and the faint murmur of traffic beyond their ivy-covered fence. Prescott stepped out of the kitchen, holding 2 mugs. He was in jeans and a faded shirt she'd stolen from his closet the first week they'd moved in. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he looked at her like she was the only thing that ever made sense in a world full of numbers and stakes. You're planting again, he said, handing her the mug. They were on sale, and I couldn't leave them behind. He crouched beside her, watching as she sank her hands into the soil and gently tucked the roots into place. You used to live in a 4th-floor walk-up with 1 window, he said. Now you have your own garden. I used to think quiet meant something was missing, she replied. Now it feels like I finally arrived. He didn't say anything. He just kissed her temple and sat down beside her in the grass. Inside, the brownstone was filled with evidence of their life, half-read books on the windowsills, notes taped to the fridge, sketches on the hallway wall from the after-school program they now funded together. Sloan Holdings had opened an entire design initiative under Talia's direction, offering grants for creative entrepreneurs from underserved neighborhoods. It had started with one pilot program. Now it was operating in 3 cities. She hadn't taken it over. She'd made it hers. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip, casting a golden haze over the city, Talia walked into the dining room and found Prescott setting the table. Not with takeout for once. He'd cooked. She raised an eyebrow. "Before you say anything," he said, adjusting silverware, "yes, I followed an actual recipe. No, I didn't burn anything. And yes, I used the good olive oil. You're full of surprises." He pulled out her chair. "You haven't figured that out by now." Dinner was simple lemon pasta, grilled vegetables, and a bottle of wine they'd been saving since the night they signed the deed to the brownstone. There were no speeches, no big declarations. Just quiet laughter, brushing knees under the table, and the kind of affection that didn't need to be performed. Afterward, they lay on the couch, her head on his chest, listening to the record player hum a melody through the room. "I keep waiting for the moment everything tips," she said softly. "It already did," he replied. "You just landed on your feet." She tilted her head to look at him. "I've never been with someone who didn't want to fix me." "That's because you've never been broken. You saw me before I saw myself." He brushed a thumb over her cheek. "I didn't see you." "I recognized you." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I used to think love was something you had to fight for," she whispered. "It is," he said. "But not against each other." They spent the rest of the night tangled together in the low light of their living room, the city outside a quiet echo. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't worry about the future. They just existed fully together. Months passed. In early October, under a canopy of amber leaves in Prospect Park, they exchanged vows in front of a small circle of people who had watched them become something extraordinary. Talia wore a cream silk dress without a train. No veil, no lace. Just simplicity and the steady heartbeat of someone who no longer questioned whether she belonged. Prescott wore a suit with no tie and shoes that still had grass from the rehearsal. When he saw her walking toward him, he didn't smile. He looked undone. Their vows weren't rehearsed, but they didn't need to be. "You never asked me to change," she said. "You just made space for me to become." "You're the only thing I've ever built that didn't need blueprints," he said. "You made me brave enough to be still." They kissed beneath a canopy of trees, and the wind carried the sound of music and laughter through the park. They didn't rush back to work. They took a month to travel Lisbon, Santorini, a cabin in Norway where the sky was streaked with light and silence. They hiked, they cooked, they got lost on purpose, and when they returned, it wasn't to the old rhythm, it was to something new. Shared mornings, split calendars, a life that neither of them had planned but both had chosen. Prescott no longer needed to prove anything. Talia no longer needed to earn her place. They met in the middle again and again every day. One crisp evening, nearly a year from the day he first walked into her flower shop, they stood in the garden again. The lavender had bloomed. The stone path was lined with rosemary. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I was thinking," he said, "we should name this place." She leaned back into him. "It's not a business." "No, but it's the first thing I've ever loved without a strategy." She turned in his arms. "Then let's just call it ours." He kissed her there under the string lights and the scent of earth and bloom, and the world felt small in the best way. They didn't need more, they were already home.